And we're live.
Okay.
I'm just watching for the link to generate. And there it is.
All right.
Okay, Umed, I'll drop you the link in Telegram.
I am going to
if
put
you want
in
it.
the Cardano effect.
Okay.
And I'll put it out on Twitter. There you go.
All right.
Pinning this. We'll start momentarily. Let me pull up chat.
Let's see here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Masher Turk, Neek, John, good afternoon. Greeting from the Netherlands. How are you doing? Kyle, how you doing? Stefan, Vio, Wanderlust, how you doing? Helge, Robert, people are starting to stream in. We're going to be starting momentarily. We have a special guest today. We hope everyone tunes in. This is going to be a very interesting episode. Robert, Paris. Rick, give me the okay when we're ready to go.
We're good, brother. We're good.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So, welcome everyone to the Cardano Effect Podcast, episode 88. The purpose of this podcast is to take high-level developer information and projects that are occurring within this Cardano space and break them down into bite-sized, consumable pieces of information for everyday use. I'm your host, Philippe, and let's get this podcast started. The hosts of the Cardano Effect today are Rick and myself, as usual, and this is our weekly live stream series. This is where we recap all of the news and events that happen within the Cardano ecosystem and the greater blockchain ecosystem and review it in a very informal, light discussion. Sometimes it gets a little bit heavy, but that's what you're there for. We like to interact in the YouTube comment section. You can throw us some questions, but we have a special guest as well, who Rick will be introducing very shortly. I want to get right into the mix of things because we have a lot of things to talk about today. So without further ado, none of what we say on this podcast is financial advice. Remember, you are your best financial advisor. And if you don't think you are, you need to find someone who's qualified to do so. Rick, how are you doing this afternoon? What's going on? What's happening?
Hey, I'm doing great, Philippe. Thanks for asking. And I would like to wish a happy Mother's Day out there to all the moms out there. And I would also like to give a shout out to the Cardano Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you very much. I would also like to remind any viewers who are new to this podcast, we are available on all audio podcast streaming platforms. All right. Philippe, you also had an announcement with the Cardano Foundation you're going to put out right here at the beginning, and then I'll get on to our guest.
Yes. So a quick announcement. I just wanted to, once again, shout out the Cardano Foundation for sponsoring this podcast, echo what Rick said. But the Cardano Foundation about a week ago released a little blurb or a news article with a video, an animated video. And it's a request for proposal for stake pool dashboard and monitoring tools. So the Cardano Foundation will finance a maximum of 3 stake pool dashboard and monitoring tool projects for up to $1,000 per month in the form of a grant for the duration of 6 months. I think that's wonderful news. I think a lot of the stake pool dashboard websites have been utilized. The traffic is heavy. If you look at the Alexa site rank, a lot of people use it as their go-to medium to figure out whether they're going to delegate to stake pool A or stake pool B. And they haven't been getting properly rewarded for their efforts. I know they have some sort of contributions on their website, but it's good to see that the Cardano Foundation, who is responsible for community engagement and building community projects, is really putting their foot forward and supporting some of these small business projects that are going to help the Cardano ecosystem grow. So check that out. You can check it out on the forum. You can also check it out on the Cardano Foundation Twitter. Rick, I'm going to pass it back over to you. Can you introduce our special guest? We don't really have special guests on our live stream, even though Charles was on our live stream a couple weeks ago. But we have another special guest on our live stream series. Rick, take it away.
Returning to the Cardano Effect, we have Umed Saidov, CEO of Oculent. He is a pool operator. He operates Skylight, pool ticker Sky. And he's a chartered certified financial analyst, I believe. Umed, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, Rick. It's great to be here again.
All right. So we have you here. Last week we talked about on the podcast about some of the concerns and frustrations that people had about how Pledge works. Now, Pledge affects more than just the pool operator; it also affects the stakers. And you wrote, you're like the hero. You're the hero we need, but the hero we didn't deserve. All right. And you wrote a paper, posted it on Reddit, with a lot of charts and graphs that explain Pledge and how it affects both the pool operators and the people delegating to those pools. Umed, what inspired you to write that paper? And then we're going to talk about what's in the paper and what you have to say. So what inspired you to write it?
Yeah. So I mean, I've been part of the Cardano ecosystem for since 2017, and I deeply appreciate how beautiful this project is, and I've read all the papers that I could get my hands on and try to comb through and understand the whole system. So what inspired me was that there contrary to all the other projects that you see where they give you one number, et cetera, Cardano has approached this with a deep thinking behind it, and as very complex system, the answer is not straightforward. And this early in the system, when we don't have a lot of parameters finalized, it's very difficult to sort of get your hand around, but nevertheless, you could make reasonable assumptions and see what you can build on top of those, and give the community some clarity about what to expect and how the pledge factor will work. And honestly, I watched your last week's rant about this whole thing, and where you kind of said that I need to take a look at it, and I said, yeah, why not? So I spent about 3 days or so trying to figure out how this formula works and what implications it has for stakeholders and stake pool operators, and then I wrote the paper.
Awesome. And we look forward to hearing more about the paper. And I got to tell you, so give people a general idea, if you take the current parameters that we're going to touch on briefly and then roll into the paper, and you give people a huge range of options, absolute maximum range of options from 0 to 45 billion, from 0% to 100%. It's like saying, hey, I've got a family of 4 and I got to buy a vehicle. Am I going to buy a skateboard or a Lamborghini? Well, I need to find a reasonable range somewhere in between. And that's what you've done for us by getting us in the right ballpark to give us an idea of what to look at. So before we roll into the paper, you have a screen share for us, but can you tell us what is a couple of variables we're going to look at? What is K? What does that mean? And what is A phi or A? What does that mean? What's K? Do you remember?
So yeah, so the K factor basically takes the whole stake and divides it by a certain number. So essentially the idea behind it is that if people are efficient, if people are trying to basically do what they're supposed to do, the stakeholders, I mean, and the assumption here is that everybody wants to maximize their returns, they will start basically delegating their stake to the most, the stake pool that generates most return. And when they do that, the first 1,000 pools will be filled by that stake, basically. So it just basically means that the network will have 1,000 pools.
Okay.
All right.
And then the next variable that we want to talk about is that A variable. And
Yes.
that is one of the most important variables for determining profitability for both stake pool operators and then also for stakers or delegators to a certain pool. Can you go into a little bit about what the A variable stands for and what it means?
Yeah, so the A variable actually has been introduced in order to protect the network against Sybil attacks. This is the situation where a rogue actor could come in with 0 stake and 0 fees and entice everybody to stake with him. We've seen this kind of play out in a very mild form with 1% pool, where they got to create a number of pools and everybody was staking with them. Even they were overflowing, people were basically staking a lot with them. So in order to impose some sort of a cost for people who might have nefarious intentions to take over the network, there is a 0 factor that that slashes their return. So let's say that, the return set by the network is 12%, they would be getting something like, depending on the level of the A factor, they might be getting like 5. Compared to that, the next best pool could be earning like 7. And if you're looking as a delegator to give your stake to a stake pool, or pledge, but not pledge, but to stake with the stake pool, you will naturally gravitate towards the stake pools that actually give you a better return. So long story short, the A0 factor basically introduces penalties for 0% zero fee for first and foremost pools, and low pledge pools. So that whoever has the intention to overtake the network with creating multiple, let's say 500 plus pools, and attacking it, does not have a chance. So it basically is as a real cost for them.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
And,
that sounds good.
And
Go
you
ahead.
have your spreadsheet there. Would you like to screen share that and walk us through it?
Absolutely. I've been doing some extra analysis since the time we talked, and I would like to basically go over that finding a little bit. I'm sure that the people have seen the rest, but we could run some scenarios here.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. You guys see it?
I like your baseline scenarios too.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to be as reasonable as possible with these. That is not to say that IOHK is going to follow whatever I've written. I'm sure they've got plenty of reasons to do whatever. But if I were them, I would just say this is the range I'll be looking to set these things. Okay, so we have a bunch of variables here. The gist of the whole thing, so when you stake with when you stake with pools in Shelley, your reward will be determined by this formula over here, which is a hairy kind of formula, where you have the K, which is the number of desired pools. This is the A0 factor, pledge stake influence factor. So what it means is that the higher this number is, the more your pledge is going to have the pledge of the pool is going to have the weight in determining your actual return. And later on, we'll see that it actually your pledge, the pledge of your pool, locks you in a predetermined range of outcomes. So when you pick a pool, you will definitely know the maximum you will ever earn, unless they change the pledge amount. So that's kind of an interesting sort of observations that I stumble across. So the result of this formula is basically a number that you multiply by a total liquid supply here. And that's just basically to simplify things. I'm saying, the total supply is 32 billion and the staking ratio is 100. It's just basically, I wanted to simplify everything as much as possible so people just basically follow along and isolate the effect of the pledge, which was the reason I wrote the article.
Okay.
So let's see.
See here. So we have a question from Sunny who asks in the chat. So to be clear, the whole thing is about the idea of partial pledge pools, which I think is the part you're going to get to next, where could you tell us about the columns across the top?
Yep.
And that will help answer the question, which would...
Yes. So...
and the pretty colors. What do the pretty colors mean? Get to that. You'll get to that after you tell us about the columns. Sorry.
Yeah. So no, you should definitely. There are a bunch of analysis that I've done. So basically, you need to slice and dice the data in different ways to just get the point across. The columns in the top is basically the pool operator pledge. And here, just to give you an example, the pledge will work in such a way that you have to either the pool operator himself or they have to partner with somebody who has a lot of Aida to finance the operations of the pool. I'm sorry. So once you have that, the pledge cannot be touched. It cannot be touched. It basically is, for all intents and purposes, is locked. And now I'm not saying that it's locked technically. Technically, anybody who has the keys to the account that has the pledge can move it, but they are very much economically incentivized to keep it put. So so that pledge is not available in circulation. So long story short, either the pool operator or the pool operator plus some investor that has a lot of Aida decide to partner up and create a pledge for a pool. And this basically number represents that pledge. Now, in this scenario, I basically took a pledge, a pool that is completely full. So a 32 million Aida pool. And I said, if you have a pool that is full, how does the amount of pledge influence its returns? And that answer actually depends on the level of pledge factor, the pledge influence factor. So if you have the pledge influence factor is 0, basically it doesn't really matter, right? Everybody, and if, oh yeah, let me just go through these assumptions, by the way. So in trying to do these, trying to create these tables, I made an assumption that there will be the K factor will be 1,000. So the system will gravitate towards having 1,000 pools. The inflation for the first year is going to be 12%. And basically that is your rewards. And then we calculate everything else here. So if the inflation is set at 12% and then the pledge factor is set at 0%, then you get basically everybody gets 12%. It doesn't really matter if your pool is full or it's empty, or whether you pledge 0 or you pledge 32 mil. So now you will see here, and by the way, Rick, the green zones are basically the zones of high returns, whereas the red zones are the zones of low returns. So you can see which types of pools will be penalized at each level of the pledge influence factor. So as we go, for instance, the pledge factor, let's say that it's set at 0.05, right? So now we can see that for a pool that is full, if your pledge increases, so will the return on your investment for your delegators. And things will get really steep when you are increasing the pledge influence factor. So for instance, at the level of 1, if we set the pledge influence factor to 1, and you have a pool that has 0 pledge, instead of getting 12%, they will start getting 6%, right? So they will be completely disadvantaged against the pools that have higher pledge amounts. And if they want to basically increase their return, they will have to pledge more and more and more and more. And the steepness of this function basically is dependent on the steepness of your returns is dependent on this pledge factor. So if somebody created a pool with 0 pledge, they will get 6%, and somebody who's created a pool with let's say 25 mil, they're going to get 10%, right, per year. And it's easy to basically see that the pool with 0 pledge is going to have 0 chances of getting any traction, because there's going to be, if there are pools that have higher pledges, higher pledge. So so that's basically one analysis, right? So you fix the size of the pool, and then you see how the returns respond to changing the pledge factor, pledge influence factor, and the operator the pool operator pledge amount. Now,
Okay.
let's say the second thing was like, I looked at the situation, basically assuming that, let's say that, an average pool operator has 500,000, right? Just imagine. What would be if I have 500,000 and I managed to basically get, delegators, would that change the returns? So that basically also gives you an idea about what the returns are going to be. So this is the second table that kind of gives an answer to that. So if you have 500,000 Aida as a pledge, and you got 1 million, then your return is going to be this range of numbers depending on where the pledge is going to be. So, for instance, if the pledge is pledge influence factors at 0.15, then your maximum return is going to be 10%. So as you gain more delegators, that return improves, for instance, a little. Oh no, actually it doesn't improve. No, it stays the same for 500,000. So, but it improves when you have when you increase your pledge. So the third. By the way, if you have questions, let me know.
Yeah, there was a there was a question in chat, but you kind of answered it from David Dummett. He said, "So if I run a pool and I have 10 million to pledge, what rewards would I get from my 10 million, or would I get more by delegating to a pool?" Now that's going to depend on, like, one of the assumptions here is you used 12%. That's why the top bar, where A0 equals 0%, or I'm sorry, A0 equals 0, that's why the 12% go all the way across the top. So let's assume we set A0 to 0.35. Now we didn't plug in a pledge. Right now the pledge he has plugged into the spreadsheet is 500,000.
Yeah.
So to answer that question, you would plug in 10 million because it doesn't scale linearly. Plus, you have to take into consideration we're using assumptions. So we really can't answer that question right now. We can simply get an idea of a reasonable concept, right? Because we have no idea what the A0 is. But
yes. Yeah. So to answer that question, you have to kind of look at this third table here. So that's where the pool operator pledges, for instance, right? I'm showing it right here. This is your pledge, right? And automatically you will start at your pool size is going to be 10 million, right? Because you are going to whether you pledge it or you delegate it, you are going to earn rewards on it, just like you would pledge it elsewhere. The difference is that if you are a wealthy individual, let's say, right, you will get extra benefit. So let's say profit sharing agreement with the pool operator. And if pool operator is charging 2%, for instance, or 5%, he might decide, or you might come to an agreement that you will get 2% of his fees on top of getting delegation sort of rewards. So that would be the motivation for people with a lot of Aida to partner up with pool operators to get more return for their for their Aida. Now, the difficulty for pool operator especially is that they will have to rely on the stability of that Aida. Now, if you're a wealthy individual and you have 10 million and you pledge it, and let's say that the price of Aida goes up, you will nobody basically technically nobody's preventing you from taking that Aida and selling it. but it will affect the work of the pool because the pool will lose its reward. So the way I see it play out in the real world is that the wealthy individuals and the pool operators will have to come to an agreement and say, hey, I'm wealthy individual. I'm going to commit this pledge for 2 years to this pool, and in return, I'm going to get X percent from the fees of that this pool operator is earning. So that would be the reason for people with a lot of Aida to pledge, or with not a lot of Aida to pledge, if pool operators decide to basically outsource it somehow.
Okay.
So that would be the reason. Now, looking at 10 million, for instance, right? Assuming, again, there's assumptions here. Assuming that the A factor is 0.35, and we have a inflation of 12%, or the return of 12% on a systemic level, you will start at 9.19%. Now, as you gain more delegators, your returns will increase, right? They will increase from 9.19, for instance, to 9.86. By the way, regardless of what the actual numbers are, the mechanism is going to work the same way. So whether we're talking about 0.35 or whether we're talking about 0.40, whether we're talking about 12% or 10%, the way the mechanism is going to work is going to stay the same unless they change the formula. So what does that do? If you have a $10 million, $10 million Aida as a pledge for a pool, your minimum is going to be 919. If as I was saying, if the A0 factor is 0.35.
And the assumption of 12%.
An assumption of 12%. So it means that you are going to be locked to a corridor of returns. You will never earn less than this, 9.19, and you will never earn more than 9.86. So
that is brilliant.
So it will crystallize, your pledge will crystallize your return corridor. So you will basically be able to plan stuff. For instance, you can say, okay, I'm pledging this, amount of Aida to this pool, and my maximum return is this. It has a caveat, to be honest with you. You know why? Because the pool could overfill, and the returns could be lower a little bit. But technically, this is the range of returns you will be getting. So that's basically the mechanism.
Okay, Umed, that is perfect because that starts to put people in a corridor for which they can plan. So that's brilliant. I would like to add and scroll back up to the top chart because somebody said something in chat. I believe it to be incorrect. Yeah. But Sonny said, so if pledge is 500, it's that top chart is not right. You don't keep getting higher rewards for more pledge forever. There's a threshold. Now, I believe you already defined that threshold with the assumptions, and the threshold is 32 million, correct?
So I mean, if
the top rate of the chart.
Yeah. So if you get 12 million, by the way, it doesn't improve your return doesn't improve on pledge influence factors that are lower. But if you go here, for instance, the highest you can get is 12%, and the returns, they will start at, let's say, at 2, right? For instance, here let's say that the pledge influence factor is 5. If you have 0, you're going to get 2 because that's what you're going to get by the system. The system slashes your returns. But as you get more, basically, as you put more pledge towards the towards your pool, then you will start getting more and more returns, and then you will maximize that when you get to 32 to actually, if you basically fill the pool with a pledge.
Yeah.
So
Rick,
yeah.
Rick, just a question for Rick. That commenter was saying that, was he talking about the max pledge that an individual can pledge to a pool?
I don't know. That level of detail wasn't in there. It was just that the top chart was wrong. because it doesn't continue going. But that is not
No,
correct.
because
No, it doesn't. It's
Yeah,
Based on the
32.
assumptions, it tops out at 32
Yes.
million in this example. So people got to
Because
understand very clearly.
in this example,
This is just an example,
this is also assuming
but it
that
is a working example. This is a working model.
yes, and it's assuming that the K factor is 1,000, and if the
Yes.
circulating supply is 32 billion, then if you divide it by 1,000, then the max pledge for an ideal pool would be around 32 million. Of course, you could pledge higher than that, but you're not going to get any additional returns.
That's true.
So you
peaks
could
out
you
at
could
You
you could
actually
pledge
get a
100
slash.
million.
You can get slashed actually.
So yes.
Yeah.
So
Technically, I like the words you're using. Technically, you're getting slashed because we saw that on the ITN, even though pledge wasn't employed on the ITN.
Yeah.
Once people went beyond saturation, the rewards dropped because it was distributed among a greater number of people.
yes.
So that's still going to be a factor on the mainnet.
And the reason
Absolutely.
why is because how Cardano is inflating, it's a fixed amount of rewards that are inflating. It's a mathematical formula that it's not going to increase the number of rewards that's delegated to a whole bunch of delegators. So the supply is projected to unlock at certain periods of time. So that's the only reason why it follows that that stepwise function.
Yes, I mean, look, I can change the K factor so you could guys see what happens.
Yeah, and just so you know, people want you to zoom in on the table, but he doesn't have to. We are broadcasting 720p, so just
Okay.
switch to 720p and maximize your window, and you'll be able to see
Yeah.
the table.
Okay.
Umed
I don't see anything.
Umed just changed it to 2,000, and
Yeah.
of course the max pledge went down by half from 32 million to 16 million.
Yeah, this is a working model.
Yeah, I mean, it changes. You know, we can change the inflation, for instance, to 10. And
How much would you charge me for this spreadsheet if I could buy it off you?
for you, it will be free. Don't worry.
This is a high value spreadsheet right here, man.
No, I mean, you could play with the numbers, and it's available if people want to download it. But again, you know, as I was saying, you know, at Oculent, we want to be able to, you know, as the system gets more complicated, we want to be able to provide this research to our stakeholders and in the community as a whole. But down the road, when we have smart contracts, when we have very sophisticated stuff, you know, some of our research is going to be only available to our stakeholders. And you know, if you're a stakeholder with us, you will get some really good research that will come out of you know, the minds that we're going to be employing, and you know, in particular. So there's a lot of things to you know, dissect, to go through, and there's a lot of fascinating things that this protocol has, and knowing them really well makes you a better delegator, because you will know whether you're making a good decision or not. And I've noticed in ITN, there are people who still delegate to low fee pools that have been saturated for a long time, and they don't really quite realize that they're better off delegating to something that's not saturated, even though they have, let's say, less blocks, that produce less blocks, etc. But you know, those are the nuances that will cost you a lot of money, especially if the price of Aida goes up when you make these kind of decisions. And you better know where your delegation produces optimal results.
Yes. And Umed, let's look at some simple, practical examples to help people kind of wrap their heads around what we're looking at here, because not everybody's a rocket scientist coming into this. There's going to be a point where, let's say I have 100,000 pledge and I charge a pool fee of 1%. There's going to be a point where somebody can have like a 500,000 pledge and they can charge a pool fee of 2%, and both pools will be equal in rewards. So, I mean, the lower, if you pledge higher amounts, you can charge a higher fee and still have the same reward, for example, you know, and people can find that in these charts. They can look for those numbers.
Absolutely, and I have that example, and that example is over here. So
awesome! Oh my gosh, there we go.
So here, you will see that depending on the value of A0, right? The difference between the ROS between a pool with a pledge of 3 million ADA and 100,000 K ADA. Now, if you move from a pool that has 3 million ADA pledged to it to a pool that has 100K ADA pledged to it, you will lose 0.47% per year, right? And now people could be saying, oh, that's nothing, he charges like 2%. And the guy, let's say that the guy in $3 million ADA pool charges 2%, and the other guy charges, let's say, 1%. But they don't realize that they need to convert that 2% to the ROS numbers. And that's what I've done over here. So a 1% fee, for instance, expressed as a percentage of ROS is this column, right? And this is basically, I did this exercise to hone in on possible ranges of A0 for, for IOHK, or, for people to basically see where it could possibly fall. And the answer here is that, if I have a choice as a delegator to give my money to a 0% zero fee pool, and a 1 million ADA 1% fee pool, then in ranges of A0 between 0 and 0.30, I will produce more return by delegating to a 0% fee, zero pledge pool. But the moment we step into 0.35, I would be better off pledging, delegating my stake to a 1 million pledge pool with 1% fee. Pay 1% fee rather than putting it in a 0% zero pledge pool, because I will earn more money. And by how much you will earn more money, and it's basically is, the function of this, basically the difference between the two.
Umed, you kind of described it in your Reddit post as well, but that kind of shows a critical decision point right there at 0.35, that if you want the A-phi factor to have any effect whatsoever, it looks like somewhere around 0.35 is where it starts to kick in.
Yes, and I would say that you want it to set it at 0.5 at this limit, because as you increase it, then the ROS is going to go down for a 1 million ADA pool, because I'll show you guys on graphs, because it's much more probably digestible that way. But the optimal point in terms of ROS is here. The moment it crosses, that's where you need to put it. Now, do people realize that? I don't know, but at least I make a point here that the moment you cross this line over here, you'll be losing money if you delegate to a 0% pool with zero pledge. You're better off doing it to pledging to a 1 million 1% fee pool. Now, I'm sure there are ways to integrate these kind of statistics into Daedalus, so that they can see that, hey, you're suboptimally delegated. If you moved your stake, for instance, if I were to design something like that, I would say, every time somebody enters the Daedalus, right? Let's say that last week I picked a pool, right? I picked pool that's pool A. It's got 350,000 ADA, and that was the most attractive pool ever. And this week I log in and Daedalus should tell me, hey, there's a pool available that has a higher percentage, for you. So if you move up to a pool that has 1,000,001% versus 350 and 0.5%, you will still make money net of fees. So those kind of calculations need to take place on individual basis and take into consideration the return after paying the fees. So in the investment industry, we have actually these cases. When you compare returns, you compare them either it's gross returns or net returns. So if you're doing the net returns, you have to specify it. You cannot basically say, return of X, which is gross. I'm going to compare it to a net return of Y, because it's not really directly comparable.
So, Umed, I have a follow-up question to you, just for that last statement that you said.
Yeah.
So I understand this, and I understand that providing tools and data lists to allow people to make better investment decisions also implies that the system itself is extremely fluid. And what I'm seeing different in the main net versus the test net, first of all, on the test net, each epoch is 1 day. And if someone switches pools, you could be sometimes looking at 2 or 3 epochs before you start earning returns on the next pool. So that's maybe 2-3 days, maybe sometimes 4 if we're pushing it and there's something that goes wrong. But for the main net, if the epoch length is 5 days and you're switching from pool to pool or making executive business decisions based on minute differences between, I don't know, 0.1% from one pool to 0.1% from another pool. And it's not necessarily considering that the pool may run into an adversarial fork or have some kind of issue in the future that prevents it from getting blocks during a certain time period. We're looking at a period of maybe 2 weeks where people are not able to redelegate to another pool. So it kind of destroys the thought process, or it kind of destroys the value proposition of making that like minute decision making from pool to pool, if that makes any sense. Like, have you factored that in?
Yes. So this is something that the delegators will have to factor in, because there's no way you could just say, put your money or delegate to pool A or pool B because it's got the highest returns, and we guarantee that you're going to get it, because you can't guarantee that. But what you can reasonably expect is that if I were to make that kind of decision, for instance, right, I would look at how full that pool that is being recommended is, and I think you could take into consideration the level of the saturation there. And I think Daedalus does that already on ITM. This has got very good color scheme. If it's yellow, it's getting there, but if it's red, it's like you don't want to delegate to it, because even if it's producing the highest return, you want to move out to another pool, because if everybody piles onto that pool, then you will have lower returns. But something like this could be definitely done, and you wouldn't necessarily pick the most profitable one at that point, but you would take something that is profitable, second profitable, or third profitable, just to take into consideration the time period, and maybe other people would be doing the same thing as you are doing. But the safest bet would be just to pick some number that you're comfortable with in terms of returns, and just delegate to a pool that's not full, maybe has a long runway, and that would give you some peace of mind. So that would be my take on this.
I'm glad you touched on that, because this is also about the delegators. The pool pledge and that A0 factor and K equals 1,000 does not just affect pool operators. It affects the people delegating to the pool as well. And those green, yellow, red indicators in Daedalus are very important, because it's the first indicator. For example, we have a comment in the chat that says, I ain't going to lie, this is confusing. Okay. It is. So the pool operators will have to do more homework to figure out their optimal zone that fits their budget. Okay, using information like this. The people delegating to the pool It'll be very helpful if they have indicators, green, yellow, red, for example. Those are great indicators. And that it scales similar to what's being described here, which follows the protocol and follows the formula in a protocol. So, yeah,
Okay.
that's good to have so that people can make good decisions. Because like Philippe said, when you got 5-day epics and 2 epic turnaround for your delegation to move, it could take you months to find the optimal zone, or you could get wrecked. And also, people will still have to monitor how that pull is doing, because one thing I notice is people say, well, if let's say 32 million, for example, is the optimal saturation point and the pool has plenty of pledge, it's doing well, and people will go, well, it's at 32 million. Let me try to push it to 33 million and maybe somebody else will leave.
Yeah.
Let me try to push it to 34 million and maybe somebody else will leave. So there's people out there that may be trying that strategy to bump others out of the best pools, and we'll probably see that on mainnet. But it's going to take a couple of epic turnarounds, which could be 10 or 20 days, before people realize, wait a second, my pool was doing really good, and now it's not doing so good because it's way over saturation because everybody jumped on it.
Yeah, no, look, this is something that every delegator will have to kind of watch, and I'm sure come mainnet it's going to be as easy as opening your Daedalus once a day and taking a look, or once a week actually, right? It's much better. You don't have to be watching it every day.
Once every 5 days.
Yeah, every 5 days. But the idea here is that let's say that I'm at a pool that's 90% full, right? And somebody comes in and puts it over 100. My best decision is just to move out of there immediately, because if that guy stays there and everybody else stays there, then you'll be losing money. You'll be better off putting your Aida to a second best, a third best pool that you can find that's not saturated. Because the longer the people will stay there, the longer you will lose money. And it's going to become a game of chicken, basically, right? I would even say that the guy who has the whales, they will lose more, because in absolute terms, right? If you have 10 million, and a very small percentage of that 10 million could be thousands of dollars, right? A fraction of a percent there could be still a lot of money. So don't be fooled by these, little percentages, because they ultimately could represent a lot of money for people who have a lot of Aida. For guys who have like 10 Aida or 100 Aida, maybe that wouldn't be much, because they probably wouldn't be getting that much to begin with. But for guys who are serious and they have a lot of money, it's going to be a significant amount of money, and they're the ones who will make really efficient decisions at the end of the day.
Yeah.
First of all, there's a reason why they have that much money, because they probably did something right to begin with. But yeah. So let me show you something, because I think that the picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
So I've got a bunch of graphs here.
Yeah, that'll be good. I want to make note, though. Sonny's saying stuff in chat. Sonny, don't pollute our chat like that. You said pledge hasn't been decided yet. It'll be decided by the community. We aren't going to make it be like this. That's not correct. The pledge is going to be a full spectrum. All options are on the table.
That's true.
We are trying to identify optimal, so stop misleading people in the chat. Thank you. All right, so go ahead.
Yes, so to the question of pledge, right? Pledge is a spectrum, as you said, right? You look at the distribution of Aida and then take a subset of that distribution, which represents the pool operators, and make a reasonable assumption. That's what I did here. So, I'm just throwing numbers here, right? It's not science, but what will happen eventually is going to be something like this, okay? And I'm not saying that this is the exact distribution, but you will have, let's say, in this chart, which is very important, that probably the most important thing you can take home if you're a pool operator or if you are a delegator. There's a lot of pool operators who are saying, only the guys with 32 million are going to make all the money. No, that couldn't be further from the truth, because there are not many pool operators that actually have that money or have access to that kind of money. And those who have that kind of money, that probably don't want to lock it up for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years contractually. And if you're fool enough to basically, partner up with somebody without an agreement, legal agreement, then you will suffer because, one day you will wake up and your delegators are not going to get all their money because the guy just pulled up the plug, and you're going to have a pledge of zero. So these are the things that you as a pool operator will have to kind of decide. And I will have to say that most of the pools, the way that I see it game theoretically, the most pools are going to be pledged by the pool operators themselves, because that's the sure thing, right? You have, let's say, 100,000 Aida, and you are the pool operators and your interests are aligned with yourself, hopefully, and you basically pledge it indefinitely to this pool. And you can be sure that that pledge is not going to go away and you're not going to get hit. But you will see that you will have a range of returns based on that pledge, and there will be other people. So long story short, here's the chart, and let me just walk you guys through it, right? So there will be some pool operators that will have 32 mil. Maybe there's one or two. So on the left side, on the y-axis here, is basically the number of pools. On the x-axis here, right, is the Aida, amount of Aida, and on the second y-axis here is the return. So you will see, and this is assuming that we will have the K factor at 1,000, and the let me see, the A1 set at 0.35, right? Assuming those variables being set at those levels, you might have a distribution like this. So if majority of pool operators, right, if they have only, let's say, 500, so the system overall is going to be earning somewhere around 8.9, because think about it as a waterfall, right? And I will give you another chart to think about. Let's say over here, right? 3.5.
So we think of it as a waterfall, and
yeah. So think about it as waterfall. The first guy who gets into this pool, which is 32 mil, is going to earn 12%, and he's going to be happy. And then the next guy comes in and says, "Oh, this pool is full, so I'm going to go to the next pool, next best pool," right? So he's going to go for 11.6. And, and this pool fills up. So just think about these bars as vessels, right? As they fill up, the liquidity goes into a lower and lower and lower and lower and lower a return pool, until you hit 1,000 pools. So if that 1,000th, which is the marginal, sort of the last pool, happens to be at 100, you are going, the last person who entered this is going to be earning 8%, for instance. At the pledge influence factor of 0.5. So there will be a distribution of pools with distribution of pledge factors, pledges. So there won't be like 100 pools at 32 and 200, and then there's going to be nothing else. So there will be a distribution, and that distribution will follow whatever mirrors the amount of Aida available to pool operators, whether it be through their own pockets or in partnership with somebody who actually has a lot. So that would be the I can tell you exactly that this will be the outcome according to what I'm seeing. It's not going to be the numbers themselves could again vary, but the framework is based on that formula is going to be something like this. Okay, so you might have different numbers, but you will have some sort of distribution, and pool operators will have some average pledge that they're going to be basically converging to.
And Umed, I would like to also say to the viewers out there, because I think this is very realistic of what's going to be going on in the actual mainnet, but let's say that this is off and everyone assumes there are a whole bunch of pools that are pledging high amounts of Aida. There are a whole bunch of pools that have 20 million up to 32 million locked up. I mean, what does that mean for the price of Aida? I mean, more money that's locked up. That means, I mean, if there are 1,000 pools with 32 million or 30 million, the price of Aida will be number one on CoinMarketCap for sure. That's just how it goes. More pools with higher pledge means that less Aida is available in the market. Am I understanding this graph correctly?
No, that's true. I mean, it depends on whether those pledges will come from the exchanges or not, because the exchange could basically say, this is the pledge, and still make it available for trading, because that whatever you're trading there is not actual Aida. It's just basically representation in their database. People are just exchanging it for one and another, but still they're not going to have a lot of pools, I think, because what the business model is to make money, and making money for them is basically making the Aida available for people to trade and to move. And if they lock it in a pledge, then if the guy wants to sell it and move the Aida out, then their delegators are going to get hit, because they're not going to get any rewards. So that's the beauty of the way that Cardano thinks about these things, because I was afraid that all the exchanges are going to take over, because the maximum reward is attained by pledging 32 mil, let's say, and if you pledge it in an exchange, you will get that. But no, you won't, because the exchanges are not going to have that many pools, because they would risk their pledges by because if somebody wants to move their Aida out or and trade it, etc., they will have to basically cancel the rewards. And if they keep canceling rewards, it doesn't really matter. So that's another thing that I wanted to make, another point I wanted to make, because let's say that you're seeing a pool with 32 mil, right? Ask yourself, is that pledge stable, right? If that pledge is not stable, then the next epoch, let's say the guy moves one Aida out of that pledge, then you will lose your rewards, as far as I can tell, because your certificate will not match the amount of Aida that's in the accounts that have been pledged. So if I am pledging with high, if I'm delegating with high pledge pools, one thing that you need to take into consideration is how permanent is that pledge. Now, I can tell you that with lower pledges, you will be able to I would be more comfortable, because these people probably won't move their pledge because of like 2% or 3% move in Aida, whereas the higher amount of pledge might have the temptation to do that. So think about, a wealthy individual bought 32 million Aida on the market, and 5 days later, it's up 10%. He might just take some money off the table, right? And he doesn't care if that pledge is funding some pool. So that pool is going to get hit, but this guy probably, unless there is a legal agreement, this guy is going to walk away. So that's another thing to consider.
All right. That's fantastic. All right, Umed.
Okay.
We're approaching the hour. Philippe, do you have any other questions? Because we'll switch over to Reddit. If you want to stop the screen share, you can remove this, stop sharing.
Wonderful graphs, by the way. Wonderful visuals. Wonderful.
Yeah, incredible, man. Great work. If anyone in chat has any remaining questions, you can pop them in there. We are approaching the hour. We're at the hour mark, so I would like to go over to Reddit and review that briefly, okay?
Okay, sounds good. So we have two questions on.
Have it pulled up? You got
it? Yes. The first question is from our frequent flyer, Tony from Shoshone. We appreciate you. We always look forward to your questions. And this is, in your professional opinion, Umed, how long could the pledge influence factor go and still be a viable deterrent to discourage Sybil attacks? What value would you personally like to see implemented when Shelley mainnet rolls out?
Yeah, so I have to say that this security factor, basically the pledge influence factor as a security mechanism, as a deterrent, is highly dependent on the price of Aida, right? So what it does is it increases the cost of creating a pool and launching 32, an attack on it, right? So if my entry based on, if I am somebody who wants to attack a network, and the network doesn't have a minimum pledge, and if it doesn't have the pledge influence factor, then I'm going to be at the same footing as the guy who pledges or 32 million. Then my costs are going to be very low, so I will be able to create 500 plus pools and attack the network. But if I create 0%, zero fee, the zero pledge pools, and I get 0 delegators, then I'll be pushed, if I want to still attack the network, to go to the next highest sort of pool that has a pledge, that has delegators. So that could be 100,000 Aida, or it could be 1 million. And depending on where you set your a zero factor, that could be, again, 100,000 or 1 million. And I would say that also that is dependent on the price of Aida, because you're coming to attack the network using United States dollars, right? As the price of Aida goes up, 100,000 might be a very good deterrent. But at these levels, right, you might have an intention to basically keep. Rick, you mentioned 3 million, right? At some point, that number could have been calculated to basically say, hey, if you want the attack to cost, let's say, 500,000, then you basically set it at the A factor. You set it at a level where you basically push the network to gravitate towards that 3 million pledge. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
I think it does, because I noticed there was a stepping effect. The higher the A0 factor, from 0.1 to 0.35 to 0.75, there was a stepping effect, which caused a greater and greater spread to occur over the chart between 0 and 32 million. Okay, so yeah, the higher they set that, the bigger the spread, and then it has a network effect, which we're going to have to test and figure out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also look at the value of Aida. So what was the rest of it, Philippe? And then we'll hit the questions in chat. There's some good questions in there.
Yes. So last question, I just want to shout out to the Cardano report that said looking forward to this. But Tony from Shoshone said that for the second question, I don't want the network to be taken over via a Sybil attack. I also don't want running a stake pool to only be a game for the wealthy. What should that magic number be? What would be interested to hear Rick and Philippe's number as well. A equaling what? So Umed, I guess we can start with you and then just go around.
Yeah, I mean, I think, A equal to 35.35 sounds like a reasonable number, because you have to realize that there's a trade-off between security and how high you want it to be, whether you qualify it as, decentralization or making it accessible for the average person to create a pool at this point. So the cheaper you make it, the more susceptible the network is going to be. And the more expensive you make it, the more resources it will require for an average person to actually open up a pool. Somebody I think quoted a 1,000 Aida. I think it's reasonable to assume that if that was the case, if that was the lowest sort of amount of pledge, you wouldn't probably want to be in that network, because it takes 500,000 Aida to attack it, basically, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to set it at a level, and I'm not saying that this has to be set in stone, right? This early in the stage, you might set it at a higher level, and as the price of Aida goes up, you can dynamically change it. I don't know if that could be done. Again, so it's a technical question, but ideally, you would want to have some sort of a feedback mechanism with the price of Aida that changes that to make sure that whoever becomes, wants to run a pool can run a pool.
Understand.
Yeah. All right. So the numbers I saw was 0.35 to 0.75. Below 0.35, there was not enough spread. That was just my opinion. There didn't seem to be enough spread. And then once you go above 0.75, it becomes a scenario of biggest bags win or crush the network, to where the waterfall is too steep.
Yeah.
Based on, and the only reason I know that is because I read your Reddit post. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that. Philippe, what do you got?
Well,
Hit the questions in chat.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I'm probably going back on what I said before because, I honestly think that this should have been tested during the ITN. It would be a lot clearer to understand exactly where the parameters are going. Umed, I've looked over and over at your charts yet. I don't have a fixed number yet, but my philosophy is, and I'm not pro exchanges whatsoever, but if there are people that have been investing in Aida for a very long time, they have big bags, and this is counterproductive to me because I don't have big bags like the very wealthy in Cardano. But I think that if you're willing to lock up a significant portion of your Aida, the return on your investment should be significantly higher than that of a person who is delegating or pledging a lot less. Not so much that it's a barrier to entry to the bottom, but at the same time, it has to be a noticeable difference because we're tinkering around with your graphs. And if the A value goes too low, then it's like 0.01%, 0.02% for every incremental stage up. And I don't think this is enough to say person A is going to delegate to pool X versus pool Y. It needs to be significant enough so that step is noticeable and it actually makes someone think about their investment decisions. So it rewards people who have like loyalty to the system and can offer a large pledge. But at the same time, that may hurt smaller pools and myself included, but I think that would be for the best of the network. But I do not have a specific value in mind as of yet.
Okay, still weighing it out.
Yes.
All right. Number one question in chat. Where can people get the spreadsheet? That's been coming up. We had to get to it. Where can they get it?
I think I'll post it on Reddit if they want to download it. So I could just basically comment on my post and just post it there on a Google Drive, and they could tinker with it and come up with their own scenarios. Yeah.
That would be great because there are pledge calculators out there. I've used the one on Ruslan's GitHub, but it takes such a range of values to come up with something reasonable. I found it very difficult to use, but the spreadsheet, as soon as I looked at it, it made total sense. Well, it took me an hour. After an hour, it made total sense. So there you go. So he'll get the spreadsheet posted out on the original Reddit post, which we will link down below, and it was also linked to this podcast.
Yes, and please remember Umed's pool is Sky, so go and support his pool as well.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, that's and again, I'm doing this because I really love the community and I've learned so much over the years, and there will be a lot of opportunities to make better decisions than the rest of you guys, the rest of the delegators, and you want to be the ones receiving that information from me or from my firm. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. All right. We also had another question from Andrew Westberg. That's Blue Cheese Steakhouse. And Andrew asked, in the ITN, pledge counted as stake to the pool. Does pledged Aida also get regular rewards in addition to the pool fees? And that's a great question. So if I'm pledging it and it's my stake, I'm going to get the returns on my pledge, right? And it's also going to raise my returns on my pool.
Yeah. I mean, that's my understanding too. So there's no, from a return perspective, there's no difference between a pledge account that is being pledged to a pool and well, I mean, there's a difference in the sense that it creates extra returns, but it will also get returns as if it was just basically a delegated stake. So as I was saying, for an investor that's coming from the outside, the extra reason to pledge, and that's one of the things that I think is possible, is that not only the pool operator can pledge his money, but he can also accept pledge from the outside in his certificate when he posts it. Then these people might have an agreement to share revenues. For instance, if I'm charging 2%, I might give 0.5% to the guy who pledged it, and that guy could be getting more than the regular people who want to delegate. It comes with a cost, right? So you lock your Aida for a longer period of time for an extra amount of money. And some people might say, I don't like it. I want to be able to move my Aida anywhere I want. That's why I'm just going to just delegate it. I'm not going to be doing the pledge.
Yeah. Thank you, Umed, for answering that. And there's another question from Mashur Turk. Thank you, Mashur Turk. And also thank you, Andrew Westberg. And Mashur Turk asks, how can let me put this into context. He asks, how can someone trust to share millions of Aida with a pool operator? Are there any guarantees the operator will return it? Now, where this question comes from in context is that there are people having discussions about pool operators would form a coalition or cartel or something and team up with whales, and then have whales provide the staking key. Then the pool operator would then have to distribute the rewards for the pledge, not the rewards for the stake, but the rewards for the pledge. There's also some confusion about if the secret key has to be shared, but we will get to that with Duncan Coots, who'll be in a podcast. Charles has replied to some of the tweets related to this, and Duncan may be coming on. So once we sort that out, he's extremely busy right now. Friends and Family starts tomorrow, so I can imagine they're going to be extremely busy all week. So we got to bear with them and give them some time because they got to sleep, they got to eat. So the question from a short Turk was, how can someone trust to share the millions of Aida with a pool operator? Is there any guarantee return?
Well, as far as I can, I'm not qualified to make a comment on the technical side, but if I were to engineer this whole thing, I would just basically make it so that the guy who's pledging does not, relinquish his, private keys. So it's basically going to be a link to an account. And the stake pool operator would just basically regularly send him from his pocket basically an extra amount of money. And the maximum that the whale is actually risking in this scenario is 1 period's worth of returns. So if let's say that I'm a $100 million or $10 million sort of guy, and I pledge it, and the guy doesn't give me the return, I'm just going to pull it out. I'm going to put it somewhere else. So there's no risk of losing entire capital.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because if, let's say I'm a pool operator and you're the whale and I'm operating the pool and I don't pay you back, guess what you can do? You can pull your Aida and the pool collapses.
That's right.
Boom, I'm out of business.
That is
so the
another
pool
way.
Operator, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's another reason why I like Cardano, because they think about these game theoretic scenarios, right? So they make sure that the pool operator and whoever is the whale, they converge to the same interest and they keep their promises to each other, right? Because if one gets hurt, the other gets hurt too. And
they're going down together.
Exactly. That's how you design things on big game theoretic. So there's a concept in game theory as stable state, when everybody looking out for their own best interest comes up with something that benefits both. That's the idea here.
Yeah, I might go on Shark Tank and talk to Mark Cuban and say, hey man, pool operator, Cardano. There you go, pool operators. Don't Shark Tank. This whole Umed, I'm glad you came on the program. We're about to finish up here. I'm checking chat one last time. I do want to say thank you for clarifying this, because, the initial impression you can get is that this whole Cardano, with having the broad spectrum, it's almost like Wall Street meets the Wild Wild West. Anything goes, and it's like, whoo. But you've helped provide clarity and charts and guidance and direction, which is outstanding, and we appreciate everything you do.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
I don't see any more questions in chat. that are directed towards the podcast. There are people talking with each other. I think we're good, Philippe. Umed?
Okay. So let me take it out and I'll give you the final words, Umed. So thank you everyone for tuning in to the live stream this week. We had a very special guest, Umed Saidov. He's the owner of the Sky Pool. So check his pool out. Make sure you Skylight Pool, but ticker Sky. Sorry, SKY. And we really appreciate you. You were here actually about a year ago on the Cardano Effect episode. I believe it was 29. We met at the IOHK Summit.
Yes.
So this is the second time on the Cardano Effect podcast. Very knowledgeable individual. I would go check him out. Go check out his Reddit post. This entire podcast was really inspired from reading your Reddit post. So we appreciate you. Do you have any last words for the viewers and listeners of the Cardano Effect?
Yes. So I mean, look, I would say that always think about whether you're making the best decisions with your Aida. If you're a delegator. If you're a pool operator, don't despair, because there's going to be where the average pledge is going to land is dependent on the population of pool operators and their access to capital. And I don't think it's going to be all 32 mil or zero. To be honest, there's going to be a range, and that's going to be a reasonable range. Again, to everybody who's listening, do not fall for 0% pools, because they might at the end of the day be very expensive. Do not fall for 32 million ADA pools, because they might fill up really fast, or they might default. And I'm not saying that all of them will be, but there are risks between all of those extremes, and you want to find the one that is comfortable for you. So that's what I would like to leave them with.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Until the next episode of the Cardano Effect, bye everyone. Enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you.